Molly here. I usually do a recap of the episode, and then the old man and I will discuss and review the episode. I will put in bookmarks so that you can navigate straight to the review should you so wish to do so. However, I highly recommend listening to the recap, as sometimes I do say some funny things. So here we go. Season 3, Episode 8 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, 4.5 Vulcans. The episode starts with La'an not letting Spock sit with her and Una in Not 10 Forward. Apparently, she's having relationship trouble, so Spock ends up having to sit on the other side of the room by himself and sadly eating his sandwich. They're given a mission to visit a pre-warp planet that the Vulcans had contact with before the Federation Prime Directive. The Vulcans had given them nuclear technology, and a nuke facility on the planet is about to go Chernobyl. The Vulcans can't get there in time, so the Enterprise, being the closest ship, will send crew to the planet, but they have to be able to pass scans as Vulcans. So Pike, La'an, Uhura, and Nurse Chapel are genetically modified. Pelia was supposed to be modified too, but the serum did not work on her. She says she had the same problem with LSD in the 1960s, 1990s, and last July. Since Pelia can't become Vulcan, Spock will cover her part of the mission. Pelia says 5 Vulcans should be more than enough down there. And Pike corrects her, saying 4 1/2. And Chapel says Spock is only half Vulcan, whereas the 4 of us, and Uhura completes the sentence saying, are fully Vulcan. And La'an asks, is that not logical, Spock? And Spock stands there, like a slow kid getting bullied, and finally says, indeed, it is. So then we get a scene walking down the corridor with music playing, which apparently is supposed to be really cool. And then they go down to the planet, and they complete the mission in record time. But then the follow-up serum to make them human again fails. So the rest of the story is what hijinks ensue, while they walk around the ship as Vulcans. Vulcan Nurse Chapel is tasked with making a new serum. Long, terrible story short, Uhura brainwashes Ortegas' brother, using a mind meld, which makes him more organized and more compliant. Why she is even with him after what he did in the previous episode is beyond me, but whatever. I actually kind of enjoyed seeing Uhura running him, and it was interesting to see that I think she would have made a better Michael Burnham than Sonequa Martin Green. Her acting reminded me a lot of T'Pol from Enterprise, which I think exposes yet another missed opportunity on the part of Secret Hideout, that this actress would have made a better human who was raised by Vulcans than, but whatever. Pike wasn't so much a Vulcan, but more like Beldar from the Saturday Night Live sketch The Coneheads. He prepares dinner for Batel's Vulcan boss and Batel was going to plead her case to get her job back doing legal work, but Pike basically sabotages her with his logic. She ends up telling off both Pike and her boss. Nurse Chapel gets really into her research and decides relationships are a waste of time, dumps Roger, and ends all her friendships. La'an appears to have actually gone Romulan due to her being an augmented human. She makes plans to start a war. This was another missed opportunity because Christina Chong does a convincing Romulan. James Kirk is on the ship, and he and Scotty have been pressed into helping La'an prepare for her war. And Scotty then rigs a button to shock and incapacitate her after she punches Kirk in the face. The serum is ready, but none of the 4 want to stop being a Vulcan. So Una conveniently has a really weird relationship with a Vulcan who's an expert on Katras, and she and Spock meet with him so they can contact the Katras of the quartet and convince them to choose to be human again. They all comply except La'an, which isn't shown, just hand-waved over. What we do see is Spock visit La'an in the Katra space of her own mind, where she can see her true self. Being Vulcan affected her differently, because she's an augment, being a descendant from Khan. She became aggressive, paranoid, suspicious, arrogant. Spock is uniquely suited to help because he's half human. She tells him she doesn't need his help, and she physically attacks Spock. He tells La'an this isn't really her, that she is shielding her fear with aggression. She counters, "My fear of what?" They fight a little more, and then Spock seizes an opportunity to pull La'an in close to him, and the fighting morphs into a tango, and then the two are dancing, and then La'an is in Spock's arms and looks up at him and says, "Change me back." Then we get Uhura apologizing to Beta Ortegas. Next is Pike and Batel. She's doing the angriest drying of plates I have ever seen, and Pike is kind of cowering in the background. But in the end, her boss respected her honesty and her vision and offered her his position when he retires. And Pike asks if he's slightly forgiven. Nurse Chapel has Spock and Roger over to her quarters to apologize and make some horrible soup, which just left me wondering what happened to all those kitchenettes when we see the Enterprise in TOS. La'an is having a drink with Una, and La'an says she beat up Kirk, tried to take over the ship, and tried to start a war. And Una tells her not to do that again, unless Kirk definitely deserves it. La'an finally admits why she was so weird with Spock at the beginning of the episode, and La'an admits that she found Spock's socks in her dresser drawer, and apparently she's upset, because relationships can really sneak up on you. Then Una tells a story about stealing a shuttle and sneaking off as a fresh lieutenant for a romantic rendezvous. And it was with the Katra Vulcan guy, and they've gotten together and split up multiple times. And then he walks up with roses, and Una tells La'an not to wait up. Then we have Scotty and Kirk at the bar, and Kirk has a glass of whiskey he's holding up to his cheek where La'an hit him. Kirk tells Scotty they make a pretty good team. The credits roll, and then there's an end credits scene with Spock and Una's love Vulcan, and this is where the high five scene came from in the season trailer that appeared to be ripped straight out of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And Spock and the Vulcan work on contractions, as if the guy is Data. The end. Well, this episode was a special kind of crap. It started out with that serum to make them Vulcan, which was derived from Spock's perceived experiences. And that's what left the crew in a logical state that normally takes Vulcans years to develop socially. I don't even know what to say about that. That just seems so illogical to me. I just can't even think what to say.
What was that line again?
The serum to make them Vulcan was derived from Spock's perceived experiences, and that's what left the crew in a logical state that normally takes Vulcans years to develop socially.
So this was an attempt at trying to explain away by hand-waving how they were able to function in this super suppressed emotional state after getting the serum after a couple of seconds.
Yeah, because they were upfront in the episode that Vulcans feel their feelings more deeply than humans do.
But that line, I'm trying to parse that. So their serum was derived from Spock's perceived experiences.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I have no idea.
Did they somehow grab out of his brain the memories and the Vulcan state of being developed? And I don't even understand, even if I accept that they can do this, what does it mean? It's a bunch of words slopped together to explain something.
It comes across like it's some sort of genetic memory thing, which, again, what are you talking about? It's all because they wanted to make this jokey episode. That's what this was. This was yet another gimmick episode in a season, a very short season, that's already loaded with gimmick episodes.
We're 8 episodes in now.
Yeah.
10 total.
Yeah.
I think all of these have had gimmicks of some sort.
Yeah.
I don't understand. There are people that have driven by our videos, previous videos, and made comments like, you understand they had gimmick episodes like this in the older stuff. And they did. They had 20-some episode seasons how many in a season were gimmicks? 3? 4 maybe? We've had 8. It's not the same thing at all.
Well, yeah, because right now it's at 80%, whereas in the past it would have been anywhere from 3 out of 22 to 3 out of 26.
Well, I guess to give credit, the first episode, that part 2, that was continuing the cliffhanger from the end of last season, even though that was stolen material, I don't think that was gimmicky, so I'm sorry. 7 out of the 8 were gimmicks this season.
All right, so 7 out of 10. So 70% of the time.
That's an awfully high rate of gimmicks.
Yes, it is. And, throughout this episode, not only did they have that scene where the kind of rock music was playing as they were walking down the corridor, but they also had, this comedic music, the incidental background.
Through the whole episode.
Yes, through the whole episode. So it was clear what they were trying to do here. This was supposed to be a funny episode, which is probably why they completely glossed over the mission down on the planet. I would have much have preferred to have seen them going into this nuke plant and actually trying to fix it, stop it from melting down, but we didn't get to see that. That was over with in a few seconds, actually, and we were on the bridge with Una and Pelia while this was going on.
And towards the end of the episode, when they were trying to resolve and convince these 4 to allow themselves to go back to human, and then when the Vulcan hippie guy helped them agreeing to changing, we didn't get to see what he did. We just saw them in sickbay, and there was a comment about, oh, well, they were convinced to change back, and then you saw them already transform back to human.
Yeah, we saw La'an in her mind palace, basically, and we didn't get to see the other 3. Just hers. Because they wanted to have that romantic thing with her and Spock, which was obviously set up at the beginning of the episode.
It's not even a matter at this point of being upset with what they're doing, because I think that musical episode, Subspace Rhapsody, once that aired and I watched it, I realized that this is what they're calling Star Trek now.
Well, it's funny you should mention Subspace Rhapsody, because Dana Horgan, who is one of the writers on this episode, wrote that one too. In fact, she wrote Subspace Rhapsody, she wrote Ad Astra per Aspera, which was when Una was on trial for being an Illyrian. She wrote A Space Adventure Hour.
The one that character assassinated William Shatner.
Yeah. Her previous work, she's listed on 27 episodes of Once Upon a Time as a writer and 14 episodes of Supergirl. Those were her other writing credits. That's what she does. She writes Strange New Worlds, Once Upon a Time, and Supergirl. Ugh. I guess there are some people out there who like that stuff. I enjoyed the first season, maybe 2 of Once Upon a Time, but I don't think she came on till much later.
Same with Supergirl. I thought the first season was good, or at least watchable. After that, it got iffy, and I don't know where she was on this, but I'm guessing it's a latter season episode.
Yeah, and the other writer on this episode, Henry Alonzo Myers, he wrote Season 1, Episode 2, Children of the Comet, Season 1, Episode 5, Spock Amok, Season 1, Episode 10, Quality of Mercy, Season 2, Episode 1, The Broken Circle, Season 2, Episode 5, Charades, Season 2, Episode 10, Hegemony, and Season 3, Episode 1, Hegemony 2. So a lot of those episodes had to do with Spock, and just what I would say would be a very poor interpretation of what it is to be Spock and what it is to be Vulcan. His previous writing credits, he goes back. This guy, I looked him up, he was born in 1972, so Gen X. But he wrote for The Magicians, something called Future Man, something called Covert Affairs, The Carrie Diaries, which was a spin-off from Sex and the City. He wrote, I think it was 2 episodes of Good Christian Bitches, which I actually enjoyed that show, but again, it's a very different show from Star Trek. He wrote for Chuck, starting in Season 4, toward the middle of Season 4, so I mean, it was starting to go downhill by then. Ugly Betty, Daybreak, I don't even know what that is. CSI, the original Charmed, but again, this was later seasons that I wasn't enjoying by then. And then something called The Chronicle, which was a show where a writer couldn't get a job working for a respectable newspaper, so he took a job from the tabloid, and then he finds out that all these stories about like Bigfoot and reincarnation and all that stuff was actually real. I would say that really these writers, their wheelhouse is more fantasy than it is science fiction, because there is a difference. It's amazing to me how many people don't know the difference or just lump this stuff in altogether. Because even within science fiction, there are different genres, and it's like, we're living in a time where there's basically a category for everything, yet stuff like this gets lumped all together into one, and we pretend like there's no differences whatsoever. It's really shocking. Not to mention, at the beginning of this episode, it started out, there's a scene with Pike and Battelle, and they're sparring, and she's really giving it to him. He asks her if he cheated on her in a dream or something, and she says, I was mad at you one time for 2 minutes, get over it. Was she referring to when he cheated on her? Pike got with that other lady on that planet. Does she know about that? Is that what that was about? Is that what Star Trek has been reduced to now?
Well, soap opera. I found it disturbing that there was the suggestion of some sort of domestic violence that could have happened there. It was made to be a joke.
Well, that and hitting Kirk if he really deserves it.
I thought shows like this were supposed to have sensitivity readers. Not that I'm suggesting that's a good thing, but they've been lecturing us for how many years about the language that us commoners are using and how offensive our language is. And then they have these people supposedly on staff that their sole job is to read into stuff like this and catch it early. And look what they had here.
Well, I've made no secret on this channel that I firmly believe that it goes both ways. Men shouldn't hit women and women shouldn't hit men. I've also made no secret I used to work at a domestic violence shelter. And as a shelter, we were fully prepared to take any men who needed shelter if we ever had any. We didn't while I was working there, but if it was necessary, we were prepared to do that because violence does go both ways, and it's not okay for either party to be doing that stuff. Yet we keep getting crap like this in this episode.
And they make a joke about it.
Yes, and it's not funny.
This episode was 54 minutes long, and it felt like 2 hours. This was probably one of the longest experiences that I've had watching one of these Secret Hideout episodes in a long time. Probably ever, but certainly in a long time. I run out of things to say about what they're doing here. They do not understand Star Trek. They do not understand Vulcans in particular. When they were in sickbay and they all got transformed into Vulcans, and Captain Pike was the first one to stand up because they were laying on the floor writhing as they were transforming. And he stood up, and I looked at Molly because he had this look on his face and he tilted his head. And I said, remember that Zoolander movie and remember that move that he used?
I think it was Blue Steel. It's been a long time since I saw that movie.
And I burst out laughing. Not because of anything they were doing on purpose, just the ridiculousness of what they were doing. It was like a mystery science theater laughing.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I will laugh at this show. Not because it's intentionally funny. It's because it's so ridiculous that it deserves to be laughed at. Just, it's so poor what they've done. And the idea that you could use a serum with, I guess, perceived experiences that would make someone who's just been turned genetically into a Vulcan and give them the control over their emotions. I think that just says everything you need to know about the quality level of the writing. That makes no sense. You can't just take a serum like that and it just completely changes your personality and your identity, and it's ridiculous.
Plus, after they came back from the planet and they were stuck in Vulcan form, they kept those outfits on throughout the entire episode. Not only that, but they were working on duty. They weren't in sickbay or in their quarters recovering. They were just doing their normal jobs. Or
running around the ship being a complete nut job like La'an was, trying to basically start a war.
And they were playing this off as like a bad comedy, and the stuff that I was laughing at wasn't the jokes they were doing. The discount drummer trying to take over things, that wasn't funny to me. But the side things they were doing leading up to all this stuff, I was laughing at. A lot of the time, I cannot even watch these episodes in a Mystery Science Theater kind of riffing on it because it's just so bad. This episode probably is okay to sit around with your buddies and riff on the whole thing because it's that stupid. It really is okay to sit riff on. So for this episode, I would recommend if you get together with a bunch of your friends, do that. Because there's plenty of ammunition here to use to make fun of, and not in a, man, they got a good joke set up there. It's like, no, not a good joke there. They're just doing some really, really, really stupid things. When they had Spock sitting there eating a sandwich, and he was sitting there overly chewing his food and staring off into space, he looked like a special person. And that leads into what I think this was making fun of, speaking of sensitivity readers. This episode felt, to me, like it was making fun of neurodivergent people. The same way I thought Tilly from Discovery was making fun of neurodivergent people. I do not understand how they keep getting away with offensive stuff like this. People are going to defend this going, relax, dude, it was a fun episode. No, it wasn't a fun episode. There were some pieces here between the violence that was suggested as okay against men, and then the underlying message of let's treat neurodivergent people a certain way. This was offensive material. Once you get done laughing at the incompetence of what they're doing, there's some offensive things in here if you're paying attention to what they're doing.
Well, especially the end credits scene between Spock and that Patton Oswalt Vulcan. He was explaining things to this guy like birthday parties and contractions, and I mean, there was even pull my finger.
I didn't get that contractions thing. Somebody correct me, because I haven't watched the middle TNG Deep Space Nine treks in a while, but I didn't think Vulcans had a problem with using contractions. They just chose not to, whereas Data could not use a contraction. So am I misremembering that?
It just seems like a species like the Vulcans would have been able to master all sorts of different foreign languages, and learning to use contractions should have been really easy for them.
I always assumed they could use contractions, but because contractions are a bit of a sloppy shortcut in language, that they just choose most times not to use contractions. It's not that they can't use it, they just choose not to. Whereas Data could not use a contraction.
Well, and this guy was struggling with doing it. Like Data.
The whole thing was cringy. It's funny because in the comments last week, I mentioned to somebody that if Strange New Worlds made a title of an episode called Cringe, that it would be probably the most accurate title they ever did at Secret Hideout. This wasn't called Cringe, but if I had to give another title to this episode but 4.5 Vulcans, it would be Cringe, because that's what this episode was 54 minutes of cringe.
I would have called it Vulcans Are Jerks, because they actually said in the episode that Vulcans can be jerks.
And I don't get that either, other than they don't understand Vulcans.
That would be what I would say. Yes, they don't understand Vulcans.
Vulcans are not jerks. They just look at things very rigidly. But they're not jerks. They don't go out of their way. To be a jerk means that you're treating somebody badly. Usually on purpose. But it doesn't always have to be on purpose, but usually on purpose.
Yeah, I think the thing is that the Vulcans, at least this is from my perspective, they try to make logical, dispassionate decisions. They don't want emotion clouding their judgment, which in my opinion is a smart thing to do. You have to sometimes put your emotions aside, especially extremely strong ones, when you're in a situation where you have to make a very important decision. Because, all the hormones pumping through your body, if you're worked up making a decision, it probably won't be a good one. That's why there are crimes of passion. To pretend like the Vulcans are... I don't even know what to say about this portrayal of Vulcans.
Of the four, Uhura was the only one that I could believe was behaving like a Vulcan. Discount Drummer was behaving as a Romulan, and as you pointed out, Pike was behaving like Beldar from the Coneheads. And if anybody's watched that, it was a movie, I think, in the early 90s.
There was one, yes.
But we're going back to the SNL sketches, because SNL in the 70s had Dan Aykroyd playing Beldar. It was like
I think he was in the movie, too.
Right, he was.
Yeah.
He was even moving around with his head all like it wasn't even on a swivel, like he was turning his whole body to turn his head, just like Beldar used to do in the Coneheads.
He was walking all stiff. It really did look like an impression of Beldar from the Coneheads. It really did. And one thing I'll say about Uhura, yes, I think that she would have made a better Mikey Spock than Sonequa Martin Green did. Most definitely, no doubt in my mind after seeing this. But her character, they also had her do that mind meld on, I'm just going to call him Beta Ortegas, because she made him probably the biggest simp on the planet. His sister accused Uhura of brainwashing him, but she said, well, he consented.
That makes it okay. And then you had Pike, after he turned back into human, and he was in his quarters, and Marie was vigorously washing dishes, and in the background of the scene was Pike. He was all cowering back there like he was just scared she was going to go off.
Well, she was slamming those dishes down after she was done with him. Honestly, I was waiting for her to turn around and throw one at him.
And Pike, who's already a beta male, at that point lowered himself. What is Gamma? Is that the next level of male that you have in the hierarchy?
Yes. Next one down in the hierarchy is the Gamma male. And he is definitely now rating at Gamma male. This was really bad.
And then they portrayed Scotty. He was scared of Discount Drummer. Which, to give credit, if it wasn't Montgomery Scott, there was a little bit there that maybe they could have made kind of funny if they would have set this up in previous episodes. Well, in a way that mattered. But the way it was done here, again, they were portraying Scotty like he was some sort of beta male at best.
And at the end, when he and Kirk are at the bar and Kirk has the scotch that he's drinking, Scotty, I could get used to this. It just, as if the Scottish guy had never gotten into scotch before. Which, again, was part of his character in TOS, that he liked a good Scotch whiskey. So now they've made it so that he got that from James Kirk. I hate how they're going back and rewriting these characters that we know and love. It's kind of like finding out that M'Benga gave Spock his harp. I hated that. I hate this too.
Well, they even made a joke when Una was pretending to be married to Spock when her hippie boyfriend came on board, and she was like, he's got a giant LARPA. And then they had the hippie guy look down like it was making a joke about somebody's manhood size.
Yeah, that was really weird, Una's relationship with that Katra Vulcan.
It reminded me of that Derulio character from the Orville, and he had those pheromones that could control people.
Yeah, I fully expected it to be something like that there was some sort of pheromone of his that she found irresistible, because otherwise, I just don't understand. The end credit scene where Spock is talking to this guy, and this guy clearly is struggling with things like contractions, and he allegedly had an on-again, off-again relationship with Una. How can that be? This guy seems to be really into human stuff, Like, his name is Doug because apparently his parents were into humans. He studies them. How does he not know these things? It was just so ill-conceived just because they wanted to have a funny scene. Just all logic went out the window.
Even though this episode was supposed to be about logic.
Frickin' Vulcans! Ugh. I know I shouldn't be letting it get me this angry at this point because I should just expect this. But I don't know. Every week, I don't know. I can't help it. I watch it and I'm just like, I can't believe that this is supposed to be Star Trek. And people who tell us, oh, no, it's great, it's fine, you should just shut up. Ugh. No!
There was like only one scene in this whole episode that was taking any sort of narrative seriously. And I'm being very kind by saying that. And that's when Discount Drummer was in her mind palace and Spock came over. And then they had a Matrix fight, and then it turned into a dance. It was supposed to be some sort of artistic piece. And I was telling Molly, that sort of artistic dancing piece, it kind of reminded me of back in the noughts, there was a anthology series called Black and White for Batman. And there was one called Perpetual Mourning where Batman was trying to figure out who killed this waitress, I think, at this restaurant. And he was piecing the clues together, and while he was kind of seeing this dance that was happening as a background thing. And that was more effective as art, and it was a very simplistic drawing style than what they were trying to do here. Because you could see they were trying to do something artistically. You mentioned this reminded you of...
It was a film from the year 2000, actually. And it's funny because Zoe Saldana was in it. And the movie was called Center Stage. And it was about a ballet school. And there's a scene at the end where you have the dancer, the ballerina, and she's being pulled between two men on stage. And they're all dancing. And it's supposed to represent that she's got two men fighting over her. It was very effective in the film. Here, I can see what they were trying to do, especially with the tango. That's supposed to be a very emotional dance. So at least they chose the correct dance for Spock and La'an to be doing. But at the same time, does this belong in Star Trek? And I just... Not the way that they have been doing it. Like, this whole episode, it felt like it was Star Trek written for people who like to go to the ballet and don't really care about logic or about Star Trek lore or the characters or anything like that.
So it wasn't a Star Trek episode at all. It was just somebody who liked ballet and art and just they shoved it in an episode, added some bad humor. I wouldn't call this a Star Trek episode at all.
Yeah. I wish we could get writers who respected what came before.
But I think they're trying. That's the thing. The problem is this is the best they can do. I don't think this episode was trying necessarily to crap all over Star Trek. I think it did in some ways, but I think it was almost accidental. This is the best they can do. We said this last week. This is the extent of their skill set. And I'm trying to remember when you were looking up the authors, wasn't the male author on this, wasn't he supposedly their Vulcan expert on staff?
He must be, because he's the one that has been responsible for the Vulcan and Spock heavy episodes.
But he keeps getting Vulcans wrong.
Yeah.
That's what this episode demonstrated to me, was in a 54-minute episode, it demonstrated to me all the problems we're dealing with now at Secret Hideout. They don't understand the franchise, they don't understand the characters, and they don't understand Vulcans. They just don't understand any of that stuff at all. And it showed in this episode. This episode was, I even hesitate to call it a space farce. It just was 54 minutes of stupidity. The scene with Discount Drummer and Spock was the only thing that I'm even giving credit that maybe you could have built something off of this scene. The idea that this serum, what it appeared to me what it did, despite what they explained in this episode, it looked to me like what the serum did is it caused each one of the characters to focus on what they're most interested in or most worried about. And it kind of gave them a OCD type setup. And that's where I thought they were going with this, but they just hand-waved over it and said, oh, this just was too strong emotions. And with Discount Drummer, because of that augment lineage, that she was reacting badly to this. And if they just would have concentrated on maybe her having a side effect to some procedure, not this Vulcan changey thing, but maybe she had some procedure done and she was having a bad side effect to it. That could have been a good episode. Kind of like we talked about this before in Andromeda when Becca got hooked on the Flash. You could have had something here that was causing Discount Drummer to either react badly or to keep going back for more because it gave her a certain high. And this could have been a good episode if they would have centered on Discount Drummer and Spock instead of this other stupidity, because that one scene was the only thing I'm giving any credit for as, well, maybe they could have done something with this. Because the rest of the 54 minutes was absolute garbage. I mean, garbage as defined in any way you want to define it. That's what this was for the rest of the episode. I wasn't offended so much. My jaw was hanging open for a big part of the time. We occasionally paused it, looked at each other, and laughed. I mean, really loud. I think the last time we laughed like this was when we were watching season 3 of Picard, and they were chucking starships at each other, and they were doing all sorts of ridiculous stuff, and we paused during those episodes and laughed. Because season 3 of Picard, I could enjoy pieces of that because it was so funny. It was ridiculously funny how badly they got the characters wrong and the situations wrong. And I laughed similar in this episode. It wasn't a gritting my teeth, I can't tolerate this. I was just laughing. I kept looking at Molly, and Molly looked at me, and we would just laugh and laugh. We had to pause it because we were laughing over the dialogue. And that's what this episode is good for. Just making fun of Star Trek, making fun of what Secret Hideout thinks is Star Trek. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. If you want to see how bad it was, then I say watch it. Otherwise, why would you? This doesn't move anything forward. There was nothing thought-provoking about this. The logic failed.
It invalidated the last episode because, am I misremembering that Ortegas' brother, didn't he hide a camera while he was interviewing Uhura and she was offended by that?
Well,
he was using her for information.
Yeah, and he clearly had his own agenda, and I don't know, I guess they must have made up off scene where we didn't get to see.
Everything was off screen. That was off screen. How they turned back into humans was off screen. All this stuff was off screen.
Well, like I said, the stuff I actually would have been interested in seeing, them stopping a meltdown at a nuke facility, that I would have been interested in seeing. That I would have wanted to see, and that we did not get to see, because they wanted to show us this instead.
To give credit, at least Una was in this a lot more. Because I've been saying that I think they're underutilizing Rebecca Romijn in this series. And they did use her.
But at the same time, they had her turning to an idiot whenever this guy came around.
It really was like Kelly and Derulio from the Orville. I mean, I swear that's where it seemed like this was coming from.
It was horrible. This was really bad. Really bad.
I do not have anything to really talk about here of any substance when it comes to, well, what was this covering? At least last week we could bring up like the MASH documentary or actually go through and talk about what TV shows have done so we can kind of keep this on a serious level. This episode was just so ridiculous. I'm not even going to give it credit for it was a silly episode, just roll with it. No, it was stupidity. There's a difference between a fun episode, a silly episode, and stupidity. This was stupidity. It wasn't fun. It wasn't silly. It was just stupid.
Another gimmick episode that utterly failed.
Episode 8. We got 2 more episodes. Where are we with the Gorn? Not that I want that storyline to continue, but they started it. We might as well finish it. And I don't even understand Captain Batel. She's going to be ahead of like Starfleet's version of JAG. I said this back in the episode with Una when she was on trial. How can this person be a starship captain? I mean, actually commanding a ship captain and head of JAG. I don't even understand. I said it back then and I'm saying it now. I don't even understand how you would do that. I could see if previously she was a captain and then she retired from that and got into the legal system. I could see that. But an active captain, at least she was up until the Gorn did their number on her, and also functioning as a prosecutor for their version of JAG.
No, it makes no sense. These writers, again, they need a lesson in real-world careers, because you're not going to be doing both.
The only reason for Ace Ventura to be in this episode was that so him and Scotty could have that bonding moment where Kirk was the one that got Scotty to drink scotch. That's the only reason Ace Ventura even appeared on this episode.
Yep. So, don't watch it. What I will say is, those of you in the United States and Canada, Jaws is in the theater this weekend. The 1975 Jaws with Roy Scheider. Go watch that. I already have tickets. I'm going to go watch that. That's why we're getting this video out early. Because I need to get the video out early so that tomorrow I can go watch Jaws. So go do that instead. Don't watch this. You'll have a better time if you go to the theater and watch Jaws. Oh, and I think it's going to be available streaming too. I mean, it usually is, obviously. Just watch Jaws this weekend. If you want to talk about Jaws in the comments, feel free. I'd rather talk about Jaws. Until next week.
Take care.